At dinner, inside the lighthouse I had called home for 40 years, my daughter-in-law slapped me across the face 3 times. Her parents clapped. My own son stared out at the ocean and said nothing. And in the silence that followed, while blood pooled on my lip and the taste of salt and iron filled my mouth, I remembered the last thing my wife ever whispered to me before she died. She said, "When they finally show you who they are, walk to the lantern room and send the signal. They will answer." But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a quiet evening in a lighthouse became the night that shattered everything I believed about family, and how a dead woman's secret saved my life. The first slap came without warning. One moment Stephanie was sitting across from me, sliding documents across the table with manicured fingers. The next, her chair screamed against the stone floor, and her palm connected with my left cheek so hard my vision fractured into splinters of light. The second landed before I could breathe. The crack echoed off the curved walls, bouncing upward through the spiral staircase like a gunshot in a cathedral. My head snapped sideways and I tasted copper, bright and metallic, mixing with the brine that always lingered in the air this close to the Atlantic. The third was the worst. Not because of the force, though it was considerable, but because of what accompanied it. As her hand connected for the final time, knocking me sideways off my chair, I heard a sound I will carry to my grave. Applause. Kenneth and Patricia Voss were clapping. Soft, measured claps, the kind you might offer at a charity gala. Kenneth lifted his wine glass in a slight toast. His lips curled into something that resembled a smile, the way a shark's mouth resembles a grin. Patricia folded her hands afterward, composed and satisfied, as though her daughter had executed a flawless performance. I hit the floor hard. My hip cracked against the stone I had sealed and polished myself when Evelyn and I first restored this lighthouse 4 decades ago. The same floor where we had danced on quiet nights when the beams swept overhead. Now I lay on it bleeding, staring up at the curved ceiling while the room tilted and swam. Through the ringing in my ears, I searched for one voice, one word from my son. Marcus sat at the far end of the table, shoulders curved inward, eyes fixed on the dark water beyond the window. He did not stand, did not reach for me. He murmured something I almost missed beneath the sound of my own heartbeat. "Dad, please do not make things complicated." Then he continued eating. Something broke inside me. Not bone, though my hip would bruise purple by morning. Something structural. The way a load-bearing wall cracks before the whole building comes down. The last thread of belief that blood meant loyalty. That raising a child through every storm meant he would stand beside you when your own storm came. It snapped clean. In its place rose something I had not felt since commanding a destroyer through hostile waters. Cold. Steady. Absolute. I pushed myself up slowly. One hand on the table, the other wiping blood from my mouth, staining my sleeve dark. The room was silent except for the waves against the base of the lighthouse and the slow rotation of the beam above, sweeping its light across the darkness the way it had every night for 150 years. Stephanie watched me with sudden uncertainty, her confidence flickering like a candle in a draft. "What are you doing?" she asked. And for the first time, her voice carried something other than command. I did not answer. I touched the brass compass on the dinner table, the one Evelyn had given me on our wedding day, with coordinates etched along the inner rim that I had always believed marked the place we first met. My thumb traced the numbers, and I felt my wife's presence so strongly it nearly buckled my knees. Then I turned and walked toward the spiral staircase. 199 steps. I had counted them 1,000 times over 4 decades, carrying supplies up, carrying Evelyn's paintings down, chasing a young Marcus who used to race to the top, screaming he could see the whole world. Now I climbed them alone, hip protesting, blood drying on my chin, the iron railing cold beneath my palm. Behind me, Kenneth's voice, sharp and dismissive. "Let the old man go. Let him wander. He has nowhere to go." He was wrong about that. He was wrong about everything. I reached the lantern room and stood breathing hard, looking out at the black Atlantic stretching to the horizon. No moon, no stars, just darkness and the sound of the sea, ancient and indifferent. Evelyn had stood in this exact spot 3 years ago, 2 weeks before the cancer took her. She pressed her forehead against the glass and watched the sunrise. And she took my hand and spoke words I did not understand until this very moment. "Walter," she had said, her voice thin but certain like a signal cutting through static. "A storm is coming for this family. Not the kind you can see on the horizon, the kind that wears a smile and sits at your dinner table. When they finally show you who they are, walk to the lantern room and send the signal. They will answer. Promise me." I had promised, because I would have promised Evelyn anything in those final days. I thought the illness was clouding her mind. Now, standing with blood on my face and betrayal lodged in my chest like glass, I understood perfectly. I reached for the light controls, ancient brass switches still faithful after a century and a half. My fingers found the manual override. 3 short flashes. 3 long flashes. 3 short flashes. SOS. The international distress signal, older than radio, spoken in a language every sailor on every ocean has understood for over 100 years. I sent it 3 times, the beam cutting through darkness like a blade. Then I waited. For 30 seconds. Nothing. Just wind and waves and Stephanie's muffled voice from far below, demanding Marcus check on the crazy old man. Then, far out on the dark water, a light blinked. 3 short. 3 long. 3 short. Someone had answered. "My name is Walter Brennan. I am 69 years old. I spent 35 years as a captain in the United States Navy, commanding ships through waters that wanted to kill me. But the hardest battle I ever fought did not happen on the ocean. It happened inside this lighthouse, against the people who were supposed to love me. And it began with a dead woman's secret, hidden in a place only I could find, protected by a code only love could break. Let me tell you how it started. Let me take you back to that morning, before the blood and the salt air, before the signal and the silence. Let me show you the hours when I still believed my family was whole. I woke at 5:30, the way I always do. Old Navy habit. The lighthouse groaned in the October wind, and the first pale light crept through the lantern room glass. 2 floors above my bed. I lay still for a moment, listening to the tide pulling at the rocks below. Evelyn used to say the ocean talks to you, if you are patient enough to listen. That morning, it was whispering something I could not understand. I wish I had tried harder. I got up, showered, put on the flannel shirt Evelyn had bought me 3 Christmases ago, and walked down to the kitchen. The lighthouse kitchen is small but warm, stone walls, copper pots hanging from iron hooks, a wooden table that has seen 4 generations of Brennan family meals. Evelyn had turned it into her sanctuary. Her handwriting still covered the recipe cards pinned above the stove. Clam chowder with fresh thyme, buttermilk biscuits with sea salt, blackberry cobbler from the bushes that grow along the southern cliff. I pulled down the chowder card and pressed it to my chest like a man holding a letter from the dead. Because that is exactly what it was. Marcus had called 2 days earlier. His voice was tight, the way it gets when Stephanie has been talking to him. "Dad," he said, "we are coming for dinner on Saturday. Stephanie wants to introduce her parents properly. I had met Kenneth and Patricia Voss once before, at the wedding 3 years ago in Philadelphia. Kenneth shook my hand like he was measuring the value of my grip. Patricia smiled without showing her teeth. They looked at the lighthouse the way a surveyor looks at land, not with admiration, with calculation. But I said yes, because Marcus is my son, and because Evelyn would have said yes. She always believed in keeping the door open, even when the wind coming through it was cold. I spent the whole day cooking. Clam chowder from scratch, using little neck clams I bought from Jimmy Peralta down at the harbor. Biscuits that I kneaded by hand until my knuckles ached. Cobbler with berries Lily had picked the week before, and frozen in small bags labeled with her careful handwriting. Lily is my granddaughter, 16 years old, with her grandmother's dark eyes and her grandfather's stubbornness. She had wanted to stay for dinner, but Marcus told her it was an adults-only evening. That decision, I would later learn, was not his. By 6 o'clock, the table was set. Evelyn's good china, the white plates with the blue anchor pattern she found at an estate sale in Annapolis. Cloth napkins folded into triangles. Candles lit. The brass compass sat in the center of the table, the way it always did. Evelyn gave it to me on our wedding night, 43 years ago. She had it engraved on the back. True north is where your heart is. I touched it as I placed the last fork. It was warm, the way brass gets when the room is heated, but I swear it felt like her hand. They arrived at 6:30. Marcus came through the door first, carrying a bottle of wine he did not choose. I could tell because he held it away from his body, like something borrowed. He hugged me, but his arms were stiff, and he pulled back too quickly. Behind him came Stephanie, wearing a cream-colored dress and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She kissed my cheek and said, "The lighthouse looks wonderful, Walter." She always called me Walter. Never Dad. Then Kenneth and Patricia walked in. Kenneth wore a navy blazer with gold buttons, a costume of authority. He scanned the room the way a real estate agent photographs a listing. His eyes paused on the compass, on the original beams, on the view of the Atlantic through the west window. Patricia carried a small gift bag and handed it to me with both hands. "A candle," she said, "for the home." I thanked her. The candle smelled like lavender and plastic. We sat down to eat. I served the chowder, and for a few minutes the only sound was spoons against porcelain and the wind pressing on the windows. Kenneth complimented the soup, then asked how many acres the lighthouse property covered. 35, I said. He nodded slowly, like a man adding numbers in his head. Stephanie set her spoon down and folded her hands. "Walter," she said, "we have been talking, Marcus and I, and my parents, about your future." I looked at Marcus. He was staring at his bowl. "About my future," I repeated. She smiled again, that careful, practiced smile. "You are 69 years old," she continued, "living alone in a 150-year-old lighthouse on a cliff. It is not safe. It is not practical. We think it is time to discuss options." Options. The word landed on the table like a stone dropped into still water. I felt the ripple spread through my chest. I knew what options meant. It meant selling. It meant leaving. It meant handing over everything Evelyn and I had built to people who saw bricks and acreage where I saw a lifetime. I opened my mouth to answer, but Kenneth leaned forward and cut me off. "Frank," he said, calling me a name that is not mine, "let us be honest. This property is worth millions. You are one bad fall away from a nursing home. Let us help you make the smart choice." The room went quiet. The candles flickered. I looked at Marcus, waiting for him to speak, to defend me, to say something. He adjusted his napkin and said nothing. That is when I felt the compass on the table begin to vibrate, just slightly, as the wind hit the lighthouse at the right angle. And I heard Evelyn's voice in my memory, clear as the bell on a ship. "Pay attention, Walter. Watch what they do with their hands." I did not understand yet, but I would. In about 45 minutes, I would understand everything. The light blinked back 3 times, and then the darkness swallowed it. I stood in the lantern room with my hand still on the manual override, my breath fogging the cold glass. And I waited. The wind howled through the iron railing outside, carrying the smell of seaweed and diesel from somewhere far across the water. My hip throbbed where I had hit the dining room floor. My lip had stopped bleeding, but I could still taste the copper sitting on my tongue like a coin I had been forced to swallow. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I did not move. A Navy man learns to wait. You stand watch through storms that shake the deck under your boots, through fog so thick you cannot see your own hands, and you do not leave your post. Evelyn used to laugh at me for it. You would wait for a glacier to melt, she said once, if someone told you it was your duty. She was right. I would have. And that night, standing in the lantern room of the lighthouse my great-grandfather built in 1874, I waited like a man watching the horizon for a ship he was not sure would come. Then I heard it. The low growl of a marine engine, cutting through the waves below the cliff. I pressed my face to the glass and looked down. A 32-foot patrol boat was rounding the jetty, its running lights dim, its hull painted the same dark blue it had worn 20 years ago when it belonged to the United States Coast Guard. I knew that boat. I knew it the way you know your own heartbeat. It was the Resolute. And the man driving it was Captain James Harlow. Harlow and I served together on the cutter Steadfast out of Atlantic City in 1981. He was my executive officer for 6 years. We survived a hurricane off Cape Hatteras that killed 2 men and broke the ship in ways the Navy said could not be fixed. We fixed it anyway. Harlow retired 3 years before I did, bought the Resolute at a government auction, and spent his days running a small private investigation firm out of Barnegat Light, about 40 miles up the coast. He was 74 years old, built like a dock piling, and he had never once in his life broken a promise. When Evelyn was diagnosed, I called Harlow. When she died, he drove down in a snowstorm and sat with me in the kitchen for 3 days without saying a word. And 6 months before she passed, Evelyn called him privately. I did not know this at the time. I would not learn what she asked him to do until that night, standing in the lantern room, watching his boat cut a white line through the black water. He tied off at the small dock below the cliff and climbed the stone steps with a canvas duffel bag over his shoulder. I met him at the front door. He looked at my face, at the swelling along my jaw, at the dried blood on my collar, and his expression did not change, but his eyes did. They went from warm to cold in less than a second, like the surface of the ocean when a cloud passes over the sun. "Who did this?" he said. It was not a question. It was the opening line of an investigation. I told him everything. We sat in the chart room on the 2nd floor. The room Evelyn had turned into a small library with nautical maps on the walls and a mahogany desk she rescued from a shipwreck auction. I told him about the dinner, about Kenneth's pressure to sell, about Stephanie's speech, about the 3 slaps and the applause and Marcus staring at his bowl like a boy who had forgotten how to speak. Harlow listened without interrupting. He sat in the leather chair with his hands folded on his knee, and his eyes tracked my words the way a compass needle tracks north. When I finished, he reached into the duffel bag and pulled out a manila folder, thick and worn at the edges. He set it on the desk between us and placed his hand flat on top of it. "Walter," he said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm when I do." I nodded. "Evelyn came to me 8 months before she died," he continued. "She asked me to look into the Voss family. She said she had a feeling. You know how she was. She did not guess. She researched. She connected patterns. And she found something that scared her enough to call me at 2 in the morning. My throat tightened. Evelyn had never mentioned this. Not once. Not in the hospital. Not in the quiet evenings when we sat together watching the light sweep across the water. Not in her final letter to me. She had carried this alone. Harlow opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of court documents, bank statements, newspaper clippings from Georgia and South Carolina, and a photograph of a woman I did not recognize. She was standing on the porch of a white colonial house, smiling, holding a glass of sweet tea. She looked about 60 years old, and her eyes had the same expression I had seen in my own mirror that evening. The expression of someone who has been betrayed by people they trusted. "Her name is Helen Crawford," Harlow said. "Or it was. She disappeared 4 years ago from Savannah, Georgia. Her family reported her missing. The police investigated for 6 months and then closed the case. But Evelyn did not stop looking. I stared at the photograph. "Who is she?" I asked. Harlow leaned forward. "She is the woman the Voss family destroyed before they came for you. The wind hit the lighthouse so hard the windows rattled. Somewhere below us, the tide was turning, pulling the water away from the rocks with a sound like a long, slow exhale. I looked at the folder, at the face of Helen Crawford, at the stack of documents that represented years of secrets my dead wife had kept to protect me. "Tell me everything," I said. Harlow nodded. He reached into the duffel bag again and pulled out a second folder, thicker than the first. This one was red. "This is the Crawford file," he said. "And Walter, when you read it, you are going to understand exactly what Stephanie Voss married into your family to do." Harlow opened the red folder the way a surgeon opens a chest. Carefully, deliberately, like he knew what was inside, could either save a life or end one. He spread the documents across the mahogany desk, and the lamplight caught the edges of old photographs, yellowed newspaper clippings, and bank statements covered in red circles drawn with a steady hand. Evelyn's hand. I recognized her penmanship the way I would recognize her voice in a crowded room. Small, precise letters. No wasted ink. Every mark intentional. He pointed to the photograph of Helen Crawford first. She was a retired schoolteacher, he said. Taught 4th grade in Savannah for 31 years. Her husband, Colonel James Crawford, served in the Army Corps of Engineers. Built bridges across 3 continents. When he retired, they bought a plantation house on 14 acres outside the city. Beautiful property. Live oaks. A pond. A guest cottage, worth about $2.8 million at the time. I looked at the photograph again. Helen Crawford was smiling, but there was something behind her eyes. A shadow. The kind you only notice when you have seen it in your own reflection. The colonel died of pancreatic cancer in 2017, Harlow continued. Helen was alone. Their only son, David, lived in Seattle and visited maybe twice a year. She was lonely. Walter, the kind of lonely that makes you open your door to anyone who knocks. He slid a second photograph across the desk. It showed a younger woman standing next to Helen at what looked like a church fundraiser. The woman had auburn hair and a wide smile, and her arm was wrapped around Helen's shoulder like they had known each other for years. But according to Harlow, they had known each other for exactly 3 weeks. That woman, Harlow said, is Nicole Voss, Kenneth and Patricia's youngest daughter, Stephanie's sister. The name hit me like a wave breaking over the bow of a ship. I sat back in the chair and felt the leather creak beneath me. Nicole Voss. Stephanie had never mentioned a sister. Not at the wedding. Not at any holiday. Not once in 3 years of family dinners and phone calls and carefully staged conversations. It was as if Nicole did not exist, because to the Voss family, Harlow explained, Nicole was a tool. She was trained from a young age to befriend elderly people, widows and widowers, specifically, people with property, with savings, with trusts that had no one watching over them. Nicole would move into a community, join the local church, volunteer at the senior center, and within weeks she would have a new best friend. Someone who trusted her. Someone who gave her a key to the house. That is what happened with Helen Crawford. Nicole appeared in Savannah in the spring of 2018, less than a year after the colonel died. She joined Helen's church. She brought casseroles and flowers and sat on the porch drinking sweet tea every Tuesday afternoon. Within 2 months, Helen had added Nicole to her bank account as a secondary signer. Within 4 months, Nicole had convinced Helen to give her power of attorney. Within 6 months, the 14-acre property was transferred into a limited liability company registered in Delaware. The company was owned by Kenneth Voss. I felt my jaw tighten. The bruise from Stephanie's slap pulsed like a second heartbeat. How much did they take? I asked. Harlow pulled out a spreadsheet. Evelyn had organized it by month. Each line a transaction. Each transaction a piece of Helen Crawford's life being stripped away. Savings account. Emptied. Retirement fund. Redirected. Property. Transferred. Insurance policy. Changed. By the end of 2019, Helen Crawford had lost everything. $2.8 million in real estate, $400,000 in savings, a pension worth $12,000 a year. Gone. All of it funneled through shell companies in Delaware and the Cayman Islands. All of it ending up in accounts controlled by the Voss family. And Helen, I asked. What happened to her? Harlow paused. He looked at the desk, at the lamp, at the map of the Atlantic pinned to the wall behind me. Then he looked at me. She disappeared, he said. November of 2019. David flew down from Seattle when she stopped answering her phone. The house was empty. Her car was in the garage. Her suitcase was in the closet. Her medication was still on the nightstand. She was just gone. The room felt smaller. The walls of the chart room pressed inward, and I could hear the ocean beneath us, rhythmic and indifferent, the way it always is when human lives are falling apart above it. I thought of Evelyn, sitting in this very room, reading these same documents, understanding what the Voss family was capable of, and I understood why she had kept it from me. She was not hiding the truth. She was building a defense. She was constructing a wall around me and around this lighthouse, brick by invisible brick, the way she had always protected the people she loved. Quietly, completely, without asking for credit. Did the police ever find her? I asked. Harlow shook his head. Savannah PD investigated for 6 months. They interviewed Nicole, who denied everything. Kenneth hired a lawyer who filed motions until the case was buried under paperwork. Patricia wrote a letter to the local newspaper calling Helen a confused old woman who probably wandered off. The case went cold in the summer of 2020. No body, no arrest, no justice. But Evelyn did not stop, I said. Harlow smiled for the first time that night. It was a thin smile, tired but proud. No, he said. She did not stop. She tracked every transaction. She found the shell companies. She mapped the Voss family's entire operation going back 15 years, across 4 states, targeting at least 7 elderly victims. Helen Crawford was not the first. She was just the one Evelyn could prove. He reached into the duffel bag one more time and pulled out a small brass key. It was old, green with patina, and it had a number stamped into its head. 17. Evelyn gave me this, he said. She told me that when the time came, I would know where it belongs. She said you would know too. I looked at the key. I looked at Harlow. And then I looked at the compass sitting on the shelf behind him, the one Evelyn had given me 43 years ago. True north is where your heart is. Somewhere in this lighthouse, there was a lock that key would open. And behind that lock, Evelyn had left me something she had spent the last year of her life preparing. I just had to find it. I held the brass key in my palm and felt its weight. It was heavier than it looked. The way important things always are. The number 17 was stamped deep into the metal, and the patina had worn smooth on one side, as if someone had rubbed it between their fingers many times before passing it on. Evelyn. She had held this key while she was dying, and she had chosen to give it to Harlow instead of me. Not because she did not trust me, because she trusted me enough to know I would find what it opened when I was ready. Harlow watched me from across the desk. He did not rush me. A good sailor knows when to let the current carry the boat. 17, I said out loud. The number sat in my mouth like a stone. I turned it over in my mind. Our anniversary was June 14th. Evelyn's birthday was March 9th. Lily was born on August 22nd. None of them matched. But then I closed my eyes and I was standing on the observation deck of the cutter Steadfast, 23 years old, watching the Cape May lighthouse for the first time. Evelyn was beside me, her hair blowing sideways in the Atlantic wind, and she pointed at the lighthouse and said, "That is where we will live." I laughed. She did not. We moved into the lighthouse on October 17th, 1983. 17. I stood up so fast the chair rolled back and hit the bookshelf. Harlow was on his feet a second later, instinct overriding age. I walked past him to the narrow hallway that connects the chart room to the storage level, the section of the lighthouse most visitors never see. It is below the main floor, carved into the granite foundation, where the original keepers stored oil and rope and equipment. Evelyn had turned part of it into a wine cellar and part of it into what she called her thinking room. I had not been down there since she died. The door was too heavy with memory. The stairs were steep and uneven, cut from the same stone as the cliff. The air changed as we descended. Warmer, damper. It smelled like earth and salt and something faintly sweet, like dried lavender. Evelyn kept sachets of it everywhere. Even now, 14 months after her death, her scent lived in the walls of this place like a ghost that refused to leave. At the bottom of the stairs, a short corridor led to 2 doors. The one on the left opened to the wine cellar. The one on the right had a brass plate bolted to it, green with age. And on that plate was the number 17. I had seen it 1,000 times. I had never once thought to question it. The key slid in like it had been waiting. The lock turned with a sound like a whispered word, and the door swung inward on oiled hinges. Someone had maintained this door recently. Someone who was no longer alive. Inside was a room I did not recognize. It was small, maybe 8 feet by 10, with stone walls and a low ceiling. A single bulb hung from a wire and flickered on when I pulled the chain. Against the far wall sat a naval storage chest, the kind they used on destroyers in the 1950s. Dark green steel, waterproof seals, combination lock. I knew this chest. It had belonged to Evelyn's father, Commander Richard Holloway, who served in the Pacific during Korea. Evelyn had kept it in the attic of our old house in Annapolis before we moved to the lighthouse. I thought she had donated it years ago. She had not donated it. She had hidden it. On top of the chest was an envelope, cream-colored, sealed with wax, and on the front, in Evelyn's handwriting, were 2 words. For Walter. My hands were shaking when I picked it up. Harlow stood in the doorway, silent, his shadow stretching across the stone floor like a second witness. I broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. It was 3 pages, written in blue ink, dated 14 months before her death. My dearest Walter, it began. If you are reading this, then the day I feared has come, and the people I warned you about have shown their true faces. I am sorry I could not tell you while I was alive. You would have confronted them immediately, and they would have destroyed the evidence before we could use it. So I built this instead. Think of it as my last engineering project, a fortress made of paper and truth. I read every word. My eyes burned, but I did not blink. She explained everything. The Voss family had targeted us before the wedding. Nicole had performed initial reconnaissance, visiting Cape May as a tourist, photographing the property, researching the deed. Kenneth had orchestrated Marcus and Stephanie's introduction at a charity event in Philadelphia, engineering the relationship from the start. Stephanie's job was not to love my son. Her job was to gain access to the lighthouse, to the land, to the 35 parcels of beachfront property worth far more than the $5.2 million the county assessment showed. Evelyn had discovered this 8 months before she died, when she intercepted an email Stephanie accidentally sent to the wrong address. That email contained a spreadsheet listing every Brennan family asset, annotated with projected liquidation values and transfer timelines. Evelyn did not confront Stephanie. She did not tell Marcus. She did not even tell me. Instead, she called Harlow, hired an attorney named Angela Torres, and spent the remaining months of her life building a legal and evidentiary fortress around everything we owned. Inside the chest, she wrote, you will find 3 things: a USB drive containing copies of every document, email, and financial record I collected, a journal with my analysis and timeline of the Voss operation, and a sealed bottle. Do not open the bottle until the trial. You will understand why when the time comes. I set the letter down and looked at the chest. The combination lock had 4 digits. I entered the month and day we moved into the lighthouse. 1017, October 17th. The lock clicked open. Inside, exactly as she described, were 3 items. A black USB drive labeled Voss in red tape, a leather journal, thick with notes and photographs and folded documents, and a glass bottle, sealed with wax, containing a rolled piece of paper, a message in a bottle. Evelyn's final secret, waiting for a storm that had already arrived. I picked up the journal and opened the first page. The entry was dated 18 months before her death. It read, "Today I confirmed that my son's wife is trying to steal our home. God forgive me for what I am about to do. I did not sleep that night." I sat at the mahogany desk with Evelyn's journal open under the lamp, reading every page while the lighthouse beam swept across the dark water outside. Harlow slept on the couch in the chart room, his duffel bag under his head like a pillow, his breathing steady as a metronome. He had offered to stay, and I had not argued. There are nights when even a Navy man does not want to be alone with the ghosts in his house. By dawn, I had read the entire journal. 147 pages of Evelyn's handwriting, dates, names, account numbers, property records, email transcripts, and margin notes written in a code only she and I would understand. She used nautical terms. Starboard meant safe. Port meant danger. Adrift meant compromised. Anchor meant protected. On the last page, she had written a phone number and a name. Angela Torres, Esquire, Maritime and Estate Law. Below it, a single instruction. Call her on the morning after. It was 7:15 when I dialed the number. A woman answered on the second ring, her voice calm and measured, the kind of voice that belongs in a courtroom. "Mr. Brennan," she said, as if she had been expecting my call for 14 months. "I have been waiting to hear from you. Evelyn told me this day would come." Angela Torres arrived at the lighthouse at 9:30. She drove a dark green sedan and carried a leather briefcase that looked like it had survived more battles than most soldiers. She was in her early 50s, with silver streaking through black hair pulled tight in a bun, and she wore a navy blazer over a white blouse. No jewelry except a thin gold band on her right hand. She shook my hand firmly, looked me in the eye, and said, "Before we begin, I want you to know that your wife was the most brilliant client I have ever represented. What she built will hold. I promise you that." We sat in the chart room. Harlow made coffee, strong and black, the way we drank it on the Steadfast. Angela opened her briefcase and laid out a series of documents on the desk beside Evelyn's journal. The first was a 63-page trust agreement, bound in blue cardstock and stamped with the seal of the Cape May County Surrogate Court. "This," Angela said, tapping the cover, "is an irrevocable trust. Evelyn established it 22 months before she passed. It holds the lighthouse, all 35 parcels of beachfront land, the dock, the access road, and every structure on the property. The total assessed value at the time of creation was $5.2 million. Current market value, based on recent comparable sales along the Cape May coastline, is closer to $8 million. I stared at her. Evelyn had never mentioned a trust. We had a simple will, the kind every married couple has. Everything, to the surviving spouse. Then to Marcus, then to Lily. That was what I believed was in place. Angela read my expression. "The will still exists," she said, "but it only covers personal property. Clothing, vehicles, bank accounts, items inside the lighthouse. The real estate, the land, the structures, all of that was transferred into the trust before Evelyn died. Legally, you do not own this lighthouse, Walter. The trust does." The words landed like an anchor dropping into deep water. "I do not own my own home," I said. Angela shook her head. "You live here. You have the right to live here for the rest of your life. That is written into the trust as an irrevocable life estate. No one can remove you. No court can overturn it. No family member can challenge it. But you cannot sell it, mortgage it, or transfer it. Neither can Marcus. Neither can Stephanie. Neither can anyone named Voss." Harlow leaned forward. "Who is the beneficiary?" he asked. Angela turned to a page near the back of the document and pointed to a name written in bold type. The sole beneficiary of the trust, upon Walter's passing, is Lily Ann Brennan. She is the only person who will ever own this property. Lily, my granddaughter, 16 years old. The girl with her grandmother's dark eyes who picked blackberries along the cliff and dove off the dock every summer morning. Evelyn had placed everything in Lily's name. Not Marcus. Not me. Lily, Angela continued. The trust has multiple layers of protection, she said. First, it is irrevocable. Once created, it cannot be altered or dissolved by anyone, including the grantor. Since Evelyn has passed, it is permanently locked. Second, the trustee is an independent third party. She paused and placed her hand on her chest. That would be me. I am the trustee. I control all decisions regarding the property until Lily reaches the age of 25. Third, the trust contains what is called a spendthrift clause. Even if Lily wanted to sell the property after she inherits it, she cannot do so until she is 30, and only with the unanimous approval of a 3-person advisory board that Evelyn handpicked. She pulled out another document. And here is the part that matters most right now, Angela said. Evelyn included a provision she called the lighthouse clause. If any person attempts to transfer, encumber, or liquidate the trust property through fraud, coercion, or undue influence, the trust automatically triggers a legal response. It files a complaint with the county prosecutor, notifies the FBI's Elder Abuse Task Force, and releases all supporting evidence to a pre-designated investigative journalist. I looked at Harlow. He was smiling. Not a wide smile. A thin, quiet one. The kind of smile a man wears when he realizes his dead friend's wife was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Who is the journalist? I asked. Angela reached into her briefcase and pulled out a business card. She placed it on the desk beside the trust document. The card read, Sarah Mitchell, Senior Investigative Correspondent, Philadelphia Inquirer. Below the name was a handwritten note in Evelyn's writing. She will know what to do. I picked up the card and turned it over. On the back, Evelyn had written one more line. The thing under the ground is worth more than the thing above it. Do not let them dig. I looked at Angela. What does that mean? I asked. Angela closed her briefcase and folded her hands. That, she said, is something we will discuss when you are ready. But I will tell you this. Evelyn did not just protect your home, Walter. She protected something beneath it that the Voss family does not even know exists. And if they ever find out, they will not stop until they tear this lighthouse down to the bedrock. 3 days passed after Angela's visit. 3 days of reading Evelyn's journal by lamplight, of studying the USB drive on an old laptop Harlow brought from his boat, of memorizing names and dates and dollar amounts until they burned behind my eyelids when I tried to sleep. The Voss family had been doing this for 15 years. 7 victims confirmed. 4 states. An estimated total theft of $11.6 million, all funneled through a network of shell companies registered in Delaware, Nevada, and the Cayman Islands. Evelyn had mapped every connection, every wire transfer, every forged signature. She had done it while undergoing chemotherapy. She had done it while dying. On the 4th morning, Harlow sat me down in the kitchen and poured 2 cups of coffee. We need to talk about the next phase, he said. Evelyn's evidence is powerful, but it is historical. It proves what the Voss family has done to others. What we need now is proof of what they are doing to you. Present tense. Documented. Undeniable. I knew what he was suggesting. Cameras, I said. He nodded. But not just cameras. A full counter-surveillance operation. We need to see what Stephanie does when she thinks no one is watching. We need to hear what she says to Kenneth when the doors are closed. And we need to do it legally, so that every frame and every word is admissible in court. Angela had already prepared for this. Before she left, she had given Harlow a document authorizing the installation of security cameras on the lighthouse property. Under New Jersey law, A property owner has the right to install surveillance equipment in common areas of their own home. Since the trust owned the property, and Angela was the trustee, she had signed the authorization on behalf of the trust. The cameras were legal. The recordings would be admissible. Evelyn had thought of everything. Harlow spent 2 days installing the system. He worked at night. After I confirmed that Stephanie and Marcus had no plans to visit. 12 cameras in total. 2 in the kitchen, 1 in the dining room, 1 in the main hallway, 2 on the exterior facing the dock and the parking area, 1 in the chart room, 1 covering the front door, and 4 wireless units small enough to fit inside a nautical decoration. He placed 1 inside a model ship on the mantel, 1 behind a framed photograph of Evelyn and me on our wedding day, 1 inside the brass lantern on the bookshelf, and 1 inside the base of the lighthouse lamp replica that sat on the window ledge of the guest bedroom. Every camera recorded in high definition with a timestamp and audio. The feeds were stored on an encrypted server Harlow maintained on the Resolute. But on the second night of installation, Harlow found something he was not expecting. He was mounting the exterior camera near the dock when his signal detector picked up a frequency that should not have been there. He followed it to the underside of the kitchen table, where a small black device, no bigger than a shirt button, was attached to the wood with adhesive tape. A listening device. Professional grade, battery-powered with a 30-day lifespan. He found 3 more. 1 behind the medicine cabinet in my bathroom, 1 inside the phone cradle on the hallway table, and 1 pressed into the felt lining of the drawer where I kept Evelyn's compass. Stephanie had been listening to me. For how long, we could not be sure. But the battery on the kitchen device was at 60%, which Harlow estimated meant it had been active for about 12 days. 12 days. That meant she planted it during her last visit. The one where she brought a casserole and asked to use the bathroom. The one where Marcus carried boxes to the guest room while she wandered the lighthouse alone for 20 minutes. I sat in the chart room and stared at the 4 devices Harlow had laid out on the desk like evidence in a murder trial. My hands were steady, but inside I felt the kind of anger that does not burn hot. It burns cold. The kind that freezes the ocean 3 feet down while the surface stays calm. Harlow did not remove the devices. He left them exactly where they were. But he altered them. He adjusted the frequencies so that each device now transmitted to 2 receivers. Stephanie's, wherever it was, and ours. From that moment forward, anything she heard, we heard too. And she would never know. Then there was Lily. My granddaughter had been coming to the lighthouse every Saturday since Evelyn died. She helped me clean, cooked simple meals, read books in the lantern room, while the light turned above her head. She was 16 and quiet and fierce. And she had her grandmother's habit of noticing things other people missed. 2 weeks after the dinner incident, she came to me with her phone in her hand and a look on her face I had seen before. On Evelyn. "Grandpa," she said, "I need to show you something." She played a video. She had been filming on her phone during a visit the previous weekend when Stephanie and Marcus came to discuss what Stephanie called future arrangements. In the video, Stephanie was standing in the hallway outside the guest bedroom, talking on her phone. She did not know Lily was around the corner. Her voice was clear. "Dad," she said into the phone, "he is weaker than we thought. The doctor visit is next week. Once we get the diagnosis on paper, we move to phase 2. Marcus will not be a problem. He does whatever I tell him. The only issue is the girl. She is always here. We need to get her out of the picture before we file. The girl." She was talking about Lily, my granddaughter, the sole beneficiary of a trust Stephanie did not know existed. I looked at Lily. She looked at me. And in that moment, I saw something in her eyes that I had not seen since Evelyn was alive. A plan forming. A decision being made. A Brennan woman, preparing for war. "We are going to stop them," she said. "Right, Grandpa." I put my hand on her shoulder. "Yes," I said. "We are." Lily came back the next Saturday with a backpack full of things no 16-year-old should need. A laptop with encryption software she had installed herself. A portable hard drive. A notebook filled with handwriting so small and precise it could have been Evelyn's. And a question that changed everything. "Grandpa?" she said, sitting cross-legged on the floor of the chart room with Evelyn's journal open in her lap. "Did Grandma ever talk to you about the shipwreck?" I frowned. "Which shipwreck?" I said. There had been dozens along the Cape May coastline over the centuries. The lighthouse existed because of them. Lily turned the journal to a page near the middle. Evelyn had drawn a map. Not a nautical chart, but a hand-sketched diagram of the lighthouse property, showing all 35 parcels of beachfront land. Each parcel was numbered, and most of them had a small notation beside them indicating the year they were added to the Brennan family holdings. Parcel 1, 1874. Parcel 12, 1921. Parcel 35, 1968. But 3 parcels at the southern end of the property had no year. Instead, Evelyn had drawn a small anchor symbol beside each one and written 2 words. Shipwreck site. Lily pointed at the anchor symbols. "I looked up the maritime records at the Cape May Library last week," she said. "In 1847, a merchant vessel called the Arabella went down in a storm about 200 yards off the southern shore. It was carrying cargo from Portugal. The wreck was never fully salvaged. The state declared the site historically protected in 1951, which means no one can develop, excavate, or build on any land within 500 feet of the wreck location." She paused and looked at me with those dark eyes. "Grandpa, those 3 parcels sit directly within the 500-foot radius. That is almost 9 acres of beachfront land that cannot be touched, cannot be developed, cannot be sold to a resort company or a condo builder. They are frozen." I leaned back in my chair. "So what?" I said. "If they cannot be developed, they are worthless to someone like Kenneth Voss." Lily shook her head. "That is what Grandma wanted them to think," she said. She turned to the next page of the journal, where Evelyn had taped a printout from a geological survey conducted in 2015. The survey showed the mineral composition of the soil along the southern shoreline. Lily ran her finger down the page and stopped at a line highlighted in yellow. "Rare earth mineral deposits," she read. "Estimated concentration sufficient for commercial extraction. Preliminary valuation, pending full geological assessment." She looked up. "Grandpa, the thing under the ground that Grandma wrote about on Sarah Mitchell's business card. It is not a metaphor. There are rare earth minerals buried beneath those 3 parcels. The kind they use in batteries, smartphones, military equipment. A full deposit like this, on accessible coastal land, could be worth $20 to $30 million. The number hung in the air between us like smoke. 20 to 30 million. I thought of Kenneth Voss sitting at my dinner table, asking how many acres the property covered. I thought of Steph Owite guarding the lighthouse alone for 20 minutes while Marcus carried boxes. I thought of the listening devices hidden under my kitchen table and inside my medicine cabinet. They were not just after a $5.2 million property. They were after something worth 6 times that amount. And they did not even know the half of it. But Evelyn did, Lily said, as if she had read my thoughts. She found the geological survey 3 years ago, before she got sick. She contacted the United States Geological Survey Office in Reston, Virginia, and requested a confidential assessment. They confirmed the deposit but agreed to keep the findings sealed at her request. Then she made sure the shipwreck protection status was renewed and strengthened. She filed additional preservation claims with the New Jersey Historic Trust. She even wrote a letter to the state archaeologist requesting that the Arabella site be added to the National Register of Historic Places. It was approved 11 months before she died. Layer upon layer upon layer. Evelyn had not just built a legal fortress around the lighthouse. She had buried the treasure so deep that even if someone tore down the walls, they would still never reach what lay beneath. The irrevocable trust protected the property from sale. The historic shipwreck designation protected the land from development, and the sealed geological survey ensured that the true value of those 3 parcels remained hidden from anyone who might try to exploit them. I stood up and walked to the window. The southern shoreline stretched out below me, a long curve of sand and rock where the waves broke white against the remains of a dock that had not been used in 50 years. Somewhere beneath that sand, beneath the salt and the shells and the bones of a Portuguese merchant ship, was a fortune my wife had discovered and buried all over again. Not for greed, not for legacy, for protection. For Lily. Harlow had been listening from the doorway. He walked in and set his coffee mug on the desk. "Walter," he said, "this changes the threat assessment entirely. If the Voss family finds out about the mineral deposit, they will not just try to take the lighthouse. They will try to have the shipwreck designation overturned. They will lobby, bribe, and forge documents to get access to that land. They have done it before. The Crawford property in Savannah sat on a wetland easement that was mysteriously revoked 6 weeks before the transfer." Lily closed the journal. "Then, we need to make sure they never find out," she said. "And we need to move faster than they do." She pulled out her phone and opened a recording application. "I have been thinking," she said. "Stephanie said the doctor visit is next week. Phase 2 starts with a diagnosis. That means they need a doctor who will say whatever they want him to say. So we need to be there when it happens. And we need to record everything." I looked at Harlow. He looked at me. And for the second time in a week, I saw Evelyn sitting in that room. Not as a ghost, as a general. The doctor's name was Ashford. Dr. Raymond Ashford, board-certified psychiatrist, with an office on the 3rd floor of a medical building in downtown Cape May. I had never met him. I had never heard his name. But Stephanie had scheduled an appointment for me on Wednesday at 2 o'clock. And she had told Marcus it was just a routine checkup. A wellness evaluation, she called it. For Dad's peace of mind. Harlow ran a background check in 48 hours. Ashford had been disciplined twice by the New Jersey State Board of Medical Examiners. Once in 2014 for prescribing controlled substances without adequate documentation. Once in 2019 for providing a psychiatric evaluation that was later found to be fraudulent in a civil guardianship case. The patient in that case was a 73-year-old widow from Atlantic City whose family had used Ashford's diagnosis to gain control of her finances. The case was settled out of court. Ashford kept his license. "He is their doctor," Harlow said. "He has done this before. He will sit you down, ask you a series of questions designed to make you seem confused, and then write a report saying you are mentally unfit to manage your own affairs. Stephanie will use that report to petition for emergency guardianship. Once she has guardianship, she controls everything. Your bank accounts, your medical decisions, your living situation. She will move you out of the lighthouse within a month." I sat in the chart room and let the plan form like a tide pool filling. They wanted me to look weak. They wanted me to look confused. So that is exactly what I would give them. A performance so convincing that Ashford would write his fraudulent report without hesitation, and so well documented that when we presented it in court, the fraud would be undeniable. Harlow coached me for 2 days. We sat across from each other at the desk and he played Ashford, asking the standard questions from a cognitive assessment. What day is it? Who is the president? Count backward from 100 by sevens. Draw a clock face showing 10 past 11. I practiced getting them wrong in ways that looked natural. Not absurd. Not theatrical. Just slightly off. The way a man with early cognitive decline might answer. Hesitating before responding, giving the right answer, and then second-guessing myself. Drawing the clock with the numbers slightly bunched on one side. The key, Harlow said, is to make him believe he is seeing what he expects to see. Do not oversell it. A real diagnosis takes subtlety. Give him just enough to confirm his bias, and he will fill in the rest himself. On Wednesday, Stephanie picked me up at noon. She drove a white SUV that smelled like vanilla air freshener and leather polish. She made small talk about the weather, about a restaurant she and Marcus had tried in Philadelphia, about a sweater she had bought for Lily's birthday. She did not mention the appointment was with a psychiatrist. She called it a general practitioner visit. "Just to make sure everything is good," she said, smiling at me through the rearview mirror. I wore the flannel shirt with a small stain on the collar that I had deliberately not washed. I left my hair uncombed on one side. I put my shoes on the wrong feet and waited to see if she would notice. She did. She glanced down and smiled, and I saw her fingers tighten on the steering wheel with something that looked like satisfaction. Ashford's office was beige. Beige walls, beige carpet, beige furniture. A diploma from a medical school in the Caribbean hung behind his desk in a gold frame. He was a thin man in his late 50s with rimless glasses and a handshake that felt like holding a dead fish. He smiled too much. People who smile too much are either very kind or very dishonest. Ashford was not kind. Stephanie sat in the waiting room while I went in alone. But she had given Ashford instructions. I knew this because Harlow had intercepted a phone call 2 days earlier through the repurposed listening device in the hallway. In that call, Stephanie told Ashford exactly what to look for: memory lapses, confusion about dates, paranoid statements about family members. She even suggested specific phrases to include in the report. Patient exhibits signs of age-related cognitive deterioration consistent with early-stage dementia. The evaluation lasted 45 minutes. Ashford asked me to state my full name. I said Walter, paused, and then added Brennan like I was pulling it from a fog. He asked me what year it was. I said 2023, then corrected myself to 2024, then looked uncertain. He asked me to draw the clock. I drew it with the 12 at the top, and the rest of the numbers crowded into the right half. The classic sign of spatial disorientation. He nodded after each answer, making notes on a yellow legal pad, and I could see the diagnosis forming behind his rimless glasses like a ship appearing out of mist. He was not evaluating me. He was constructing a document, a weapon disguised as medicine. But what Ashford did not know was that Harlow was parked in the medical building lot in a gray van with tinted windows, monitoring a live feed from a device smaller than a pencil eraser clipped inside my shirt pocket. Audio and video. Time-stamped. Encrypted. Backed up to the server on the Resolute in real time. Every question Ashford asked, every answer I gave, every note he scribbled, was being recorded in a format that met federal evidentiary standards. And there was something else Ashford did not know. While I sat in his beige office pretending to forget my own name, Harlow was making a phone call of his own. He had spent the previous evening tracing Ashford's financial records through a contact at the New Jersey Division of Consumer Affairs. What he found was a wire transfer of $18,000 from an offshore account registered in the Cayman Islands to Ashford's personal checking account. The transfer was made 3 days before my appointment. The originating account was linked to a shell company called Meridian Coastal Holdings. The sole director of Meridian Coastal Holdings was Kenneth Voss. They had paid Ashford $18,000 to diagnose me with dementia. And now we had the receipt. When the evaluation ended, Ashford stood and shook my hand with that same dead fish grip. He told me everything looked fine, and that he would send a report to my family within a week. He smiled his empty smile. I smiled back. The confused, slightly lost smile of a man who does not know where he is. But I knew exactly where I was. I was inside the trap my wife had designed, playing the role she had written for me. And the walls were closing in on every person who thought I was too old and too broken to fight back. The storm came on a Friday night. It rolled in from the northeast like a fist closing over the coastline, bringing 40-knot winds and rain that hit the lighthouse windows like handfuls of gravel. I had been through 100 storms in this tower. I knew the sounds by heart. The way the granite groaned when the wind found the cracks. The way the staircase hummed like a tuning fork when the pressure dropped. The way the ocean changed its voice from a whisper to a roar in less than an hour. But this storm was different. This one brought Kenneth Voss. He arrived at 9:30 without calling. I heard the front door open and close, and then heavy footsteps on the stone floor below. I was in the chart room, reading Evelyn's journal for the 4th time, and I closed it quickly and slid it into the desk drawer before standing. Harlow was on the Resolute, anchored behind the jetty. He had the camera feeds on his laptop and the audio receivers tuned to the lighthouse frequencies. He could see and hear everything, but he was 12 minutes away by foot if something went wrong. Kenneth climbed the stairs with the confidence of a man who believed he already owned the building. He appeared in the doorway of the chart room, wearing a black raincoat slick with water. His silver hair pressed flat against his skull. He did not knock. He did not greet me. He stood there and looked at me the way a man looks at a lock he is about to pick. "Walter," he said. "We need to talk." I gestured to the chair across from the desk. He did not sit. He walked to the window and looked out at the storm. The lighthouse beams swept through the rain above us, turning the darkness into a slow strobe of white and shadow. "Stephanie tells me you had a good visit with Dr. Ashford," he said. His voice was casual, but his shoulders were rigid. "She says the doctor has some concerns. About your memory, about your ability to live alone." I said nothing. I let the silence do what silence does best. It makes liars uncomfortable. Kenneth turned from the window. "I am going to be direct with you," he said. "This lighthouse, this land, it is too much for one man. You are almost 70 years old. You have no income. Your son cannot take care of you because, frankly, he can barely take care of himself. And your granddaughter is a child. She should not be responsible for keeping a 150-year-old building from falling into the sea." He took a step closer to me. "I have a buyer," he said. "A development group from New York. They are prepared to offer $6.5 million for the entire property. That is more than the assessed value. More than you would get on the open market. All you have to do is sign the transfer documents, and I will make sure you are taken care of. A nice retirement community in Haddonfield. Private room. Garden view. You would be comfortable." I looked at him. The cameras in the chart room were recording. The model ship on the mantel held a lens pointed directly at his face. The audio receiver and the brass lantern on the bookshelf was capturing every syllable. I needed him to keep talking. "That is a generous offer," I said, keeping my voice slow and uncertain, the way I had practiced with Harlow. "But I do not know. This is my home. Evelyn and I built our life here." Kenneth's expression softened, but his eyes did not. The eyes stayed hard and calculating, like two stones at the bottom of a clear stream. "Walter," he said, "Evelyn is gone. I know that is painful to hear. But it is the truth. She would want you to be safe. She would want you to be practical." He had no idea what Evelyn would want. He had no idea that Evelyn had spent the last year of her life making absolutely certain that a man like him would never touch a single grain of sand on this property. But I kept my face neutral and my hands folded on the desk. "Let me think about it," I said. Kenneth nodded, but his jaw tightened, and I saw something shift behind his eyes. Patience leaving. Something else arriving. He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "There is one more thing," he said. His voice had changed. The casual tone was gone, replaced by something flat and metallic. "I have been talking to some people in Trenton, people in the state records office, and I have learned that there are some irregularities with the deed to this property. Problems with the title chain going back to the original land grant. Now, I am sure it is nothing, but if someone were to challenge the title in court, it could tie up the property for years. Lawyers, hearings, injunctions. It would be expensive. It would be exhausting. And at your age, Walter, I do not think you want to spend your remaining years in a courtroom." The threat hung in the air between us like the smell of smoke before you see the fire. He was telling me that if I did not sell voluntarily, he would attack the deed itself. He would try to dismantle the legal foundation of the property from the ground up. It was the same tactic Harlow had described from the Crawford case. The wetland easement in Savannah that was mysteriously revoked. I let my face show fear. I let my hands tremble slightly on the desk. Kenneth saw it and smiled. A thin, satisfied smile. The smile of a man who believes he has won. "I will give you until the end of the month," he said. Then he turned and walked down the stairs. The front door opened and closed. His car engine started in the rain, and headlights swept across the windows as he drove away. I sat still for a full minute after he left. Then I opened the desk drawer and pulled out Evelyn's journal. I turned to a page near the back, where she had written a single paragraph in red ink, underlined twice. "They will threaten the title. They always do. I have already filed a quiet title action with the Cape May County Superior Court, and it was resolved in our favor on March 15th, 2023. The title is clean. The chain is unbroken. Let them try." I closed the journal and looked at the camera hidden in the model ship on the mantel. Every word Kenneth had spoken was recorded. His offer, his threat, his smile, all of it stored on Harlow's encrypted server, time-stamped, and ready for the day it would be played in a courtroom. The storm outside was getting worse. The wind screamed against the granite walls, and the ocean threw itself against the cliff like an animal trying to break through a cage. But inside the lighthouse, I was calm. Because Evelyn had already weathered this storm. She had weathered it months before it arrived. Kenneth came back 3 hours later. I did not hear the car this time. The storm was too loud, the wind too thick, with rain and salt spray. What I heard was the side door, the one that opens onto the maintenance walkway along the eastern wall, creaking on its iron hinges. It was a door I never used, a door I had not unlocked in months, which meant someone else had a key. I was in the kitchen, making tea, because that is what old men do when they cannot sleep, and the world is falling apart around them. The kettle was whistling, and the steam was curling up toward the stone ceiling. And for a moment the sound covered everything. Then the kettle went quiet, and I heard footsteps. Not Kenneth's heavy, confident stride from earlier. These were careful, measured. The footsteps of someone who did not want to be heard. I turned off the kitchen light and stood in the darkness. My hip ached from where I had hit the floor during the dinner slaps, and my heart was beating faster than I wanted it to. I am 69 years old. I have survived hurricanes and engine failures, and a war that never officially called itself a war. But standing alone in a dark kitchen listening to footsteps approach is a different kind of fear. It is the kind that lives in your chest and whispers that you are too old for this, that your body will not do what your mind demands, that the distance between who you were and who you are has become too wide to cross. The footsteps stopped outside the kitchen door. I could see a shadow through the frosted glass panel, backlit by the emergency light in the hallway. The shadow was tall and broad. Kenneth. He stood there for what felt like a full minute, and I could hear his breathing through the door. Heavy, deliberate. The breathing of a man who is working himself up to do something he has already decided to do. The door opened. Kenneth stepped in, and even in the darkness I could see that his face had changed from earlier. The mask of civility was gone. What remained was raw and ugly, the face of a man who had spent 3 hours driving through a storm and drinking from the silver flask I had seen in his coat pocket that evening. His eyes were glassy, and his movements were loose in the way that alcohol makes a dangerous man more dangerous. "You should have taken the offer," he said. His voice was thick and slow. "I gave you a chance, Walter. A generous chance. And you sat there in your little chair in your little room and you thought you could outthink me. You thought your dead wife's paperwork would save you." He knew about the trust. Not the details, not the mineral deposits, not the sealed geological survey. But he knew something existed that was blocking his path. Someone had told him. Ashford, perhaps, or someone in Trenton who had come across Angela's filings. The quiet title action Evelyn had won was a matter of public record. Anyone looking hard enough would have found it. Kenneth moved toward me. I stepped back and felt the counterpress against my lower back. There was nowhere to go. The kitchen is small, 8 feet by 12, with one door and one window. The window was locked and the storm was howling against it like a living thing. Kenneth was between me and the door. He grabbed my shirt. His fist closed around the flannel and pulled me forward so that I could smell the whiskey on his breath and the rain in his hair. "You are going to sign those papers," he said. "You are going to sign them tonight, or I am going to make sure you never climb those stairs again." His other hand came up and pushed me sideways. I stumbled into the kitchen table, knocking over the teacup. It shattered on the stone floor, with a sound like a small bone breaking. I caught myself on the table edge, and for a moment the pain in my hip flared so bright that my vision went white. Kenneth stepped closer. He raised his hand, and then a light appeared at the top of the kitchen stairs. Lily was standing on the landing in her pajamas, her phone held in front of her face, the screen glowing blue-white in the darkness. She was filming. She had been in the guest bedroom on the 3rd floor, the room where Harlow had installed the wireless camera inside the lighthouse lamp replica. She must have heard the side door open. She must have come down the stairs in bare feet, silent as the tide, and positioned herself where she could see everything without being seen. "Get away from my grandfather," she said. Her voice was steady, not loud, not shaking. Steady, like the beam of the lighthouse cutting through the storm above us. She was 16 years old and she was standing at the top of a dark staircase facing a drunk and violent man twice her size, and her voice did not waver. Kenneth froze. He looked up at her, at the phone, at the light. His hand was still raised. His face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise, calculation, fear, because he understood what that phone meant. He understood that a 16-year-old girl with a camera had just become the most dangerous person in the room. "Put that down," he said. His voice cracked. "This is a family matter." Lily did not move. "It is all on video," she said. "Everything. The grab, the push, the threat. I have been recording since you opened the side door, and it is already uploading to the cloud. You cannot delete it. You cannot take my phone. It is done." Kenneth released my shirt. He took a step back. The whiskey confidence drained from his face like water from a broken glass. He looked at me, then at Lily, then at the door. He opened his mouth to say something, but nothing came out. For the first time since I had known him, Kenneth Voss had no words. He left through the side door. The storm swallowed the sound of his footsteps, and a moment later headlights flashed across the kitchen window and disappeared down the access road. Lily came down the stairs and helped me into a chair. Her hands were shaking now. The steadiness had been an act, a performance as disciplined as anything I had given Ashford. She was shaking, and her eyes were wet, but she did not cry. "Are you okay?" she whispered. I pulled her close and held her the way I used to hold Evelyn, when the world outside the lighthouse was too loud and too cruel. She pressed her face against my shoulder, and I felt her breathing slow. "We have everything we need," I said. "And in the morning, I am calling Angela." Lily pulled back and looked at me. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and nodded. Then, she held up her phone. 47 minutes of footage, she said. Every second. Somewhere above us, the lighthouse beam turned and turned and turned. And the storm, for all its fury, could not put it out. Angela filed 3 motions the following Monday. An emergency restraining order against Kenneth Voss, a criminal complaint for assault and trespassing, and a formal petition to preserve all digital evidence captured on the lighthouse property cameras and Lily's phone. The Cape May County Superior Court granted the restraining order within 48 hours. Kenneth was prohibited from coming within 500 feet of the lighthouse, the dock, and any member of the Brennan family. When the sheriff delivered the papers to the Voss rental house on Beach Avenue, Stephanie answered the door. She read the document, folded it neatly, and closed the door without a word. Harlow, parked across the street in the gray van, recorded everything. But Angela was not finished. She had been planning something larger, something Evelyn had outlined in the final pages of the journal. A public event, not a press conference, not a legal proceeding, something more powerful than either. The 150th anniversary of the Brennan Lighthouse was 17 days away. The Cape May Historical Society had been organizing a celebration for months. 350 guests were expected. Local officials, historians, journalists, retired Coast Guard officers, and families from across the county who had grown up watching the lighthouse beams sweep across the water every night of their lives. Evelyn had known about the anniversary. She had marked the date in her journal with a red circle and written beside it, "This is the day." Not a funeral, not a courtroom, a celebration. Let the light speak for itself. Angela proposed that we use the anniversary event to make 3 announcements. First, the existence of the irrevocable trust and its protections. Second, the identity of Lily as the sole beneficiary. Third, a public reading of selected passages from Evelyn's journal, carefully chosen to honor her memory without revealing specific evidence that would be needed in court. The goal was not to expose the Voss family directly. Not yet. The goal was to build a wall of public witness around the lighthouse so high and so visible that any future attack on the property would be seen by everyone. I agreed. Lily agreed. Harlow agreed. Marcus, I had not spoken to since the dinner. He had called twice and left messages that sounded like scripts Stephanie had written for him. "Dad, I think we should talk about what happened. Dad." Stephanie feels terrible about the misunderstanding. I did not return the calls. I was not ready. And I was not sure the man on the other end of the line was my son or a puppet with my son's voice. The anniversary fell on a Saturday in late October. The weather broke clean and cold, the kind of autumn day that makes the New Jersey coast look like a painting. Blue sky, sharp wind, the ocean flat and silver under a sun that sat low on the horizon like a coin balanced on its edge. The Historical Society had set up a white tent on the south lawn, with rows of folding chairs facing a small wooden stage. American flags snapped on poles along the access road. A brass band from the Cape May Fire Department played marches that echoed off the granite walls. 312 people came. I know the exact number because Angela counted. She stood at the entrance with a clipboard, greeting every guest, shaking every hand, recording every name. This was not hospitality. This was documentation. Every person who walked through that gate became a witness. I spoke first. I stood on the stage in a blue suit Evelyn had bought me for our 40th anniversary, and I looked out at 312 faces. Some I recognized. Jimmy Peralta from the harbor, Officer Daniels from the Cape May Police, Margaret Liu from the Historical Society, and in the back row, trying to be invisible, Stephanie. She had come alone. Marcus was not with her. She sat with her hands in her lap and her sunglasses on, and she watched me the way a cat watches a door it cannot open. I told them about the lighthouse, about my great-grandfather, Thomas Brennan, who built it in 1874 after his brother drowned in a shipwreck off the Cape, about my grandfather, who kept the light burning through 2 world wars, about my father, who turned down an offer from a hotel chain in 1962 because he believed some things matter more than money, and about Evelyn, who loved this place more than anyone, and who spent her final months making sure it would stand forever. My voice cracked when I said her name. I let it crack. I did not hide it or smooth it over. 312 people heard the sound of a man who still loved his dead wife, and that sound was more powerful than any legal document. Then Angela took the stage. She was precise and calm, the way a surgeon is calm when the blade is in her hand. She announced the existence of the Brennan Lighthouse Preservation Trust, an irrevocable legal entity established by Evelyn Brennan to protect the lighthouse, the land, and all structures on the property in perpetuity. She explained that the trust could not be sold, mortgaged, transferred, or dissolved by any individual. She named herself as trustee and outlined the oversight structure Evelyn had designed. And then she said the words that changed everything. The sole beneficiary of the trust, she said, upon the passing of Walter Brennan, is his granddaughter, Lily Ann Brennan. Lily, who is here with us today, will inherit not only this lighthouse, but the responsibility of keeping its light burning for the next generation. The crowd applauded. Lily stood beside me on the stage, wearing a white dress and her grandmother's pearl earrings, and she looked out at 312 people, clapping for a future she had not asked for, but was ready to carry. I put my arm around her shoulder and felt her straighten her spine the way Evelyn used to do when she was about to say something important. I glanced at the back row. Stephanie's chair was empty. She had left. But the cameras along the property line had captured her face at the moment Angela said Lily's name. And in that frozen frame, which I would see later on Harlow's laptop, her expression was not anger. It was not surprise. It was terror. The expression of a woman who has just realized that the ground beneath her feet has been hollow all along, and it is about to collapse. Marcus came to the lighthouse on a Tuesday morning, alone, without calling. I saw him through the kitchen window, walking up the stone path from the parking area with his hands in his pockets and his shoulders hunched against the November wind. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically. Something else. Something inside him had compressed, like a man carrying a weight he could not name but could no longer pretend was not there. I opened the door before he knocked. We stood looking at each other for a long moment, and I saw things in his face I had not allowed myself to see before. Dark circles under his eyes so deep they looked like bruises, a tremor in his jaw, the particular exhaustion of a man who has not slept well in years, not because of insomnia, but because the person lying next to him makes rest impossible. "Dad," he said, "I need to talk to you." We sat in the kitchen. I made coffee, the strong black kind, and set a cup in front of him. He wrapped both hands around it, but did not drink. He stared at the surface of the liquid the way a man stares at deep water when he is deciding whether to jump. "I found something," he said. "In Stephanie's office. In the house." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a bundle of papers held together with a rubber band. His hands were shaking when he placed them on the table. I could see the edges of envelopes, photocopied bank statements, and what looked like handwritten letters on cream-colored stationery. The handwriting was not Stephanie's. It was smaller, more careful, and it slanted to the left. Marcus spoke slowly, like a man pulling a fishhook out of his own skin. "Last week, Stephanie left for Philadelphia. She said she had a meeting with a real estate attorney. She took her laptop, her phone, and the leather folder she keeps locked in the bottom drawer of her desk. But she forgot the key. It was in the pocket of the coat she wore the day before. The gray one hanging in the hall closet. I do not know why I took it. Maybe I have known for a long time that something was wrong and I just needed a reason to look." He paused. The coffee steamed between his hands. "The drawer had 4 things in it," he continued. "A folder of bank statements, a bundle of letters, a burner phone, and a photograph of a woman I have never seen." He pulled the photograph from the bundle and slid it across the table. I picked it up and felt the room tilt slightly. It was a picture of a young woman, maybe 25, with auburn hair and a wide smile, standing in front of a white colonial house. She looked familiar, but I could not place her immediately. Then I turned the photograph over. On the back, in Stephanie's handwriting, were 2 words. "Before Rachel." Marcus swallowed hard. "The letters are from someone named Rachel," he said. "They are addressed to Stephanie, but they use a different name. They call her Nicole." The kitchen went silent. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. Nicole, Stephanie's sister. The woman Harlow had told me about, the one who infiltrated Helen Crawford's life in Savannah, the one the Voss family used as their primary tool for elder fraud. But Marcus had never heard that name. He did not know about Nicole. He did not know about Helen Crawford, or the red folder, or any of it. I looked at my son and made a decision. I told him everything. I told him about Harlow's investigation, about Evelyn's journal, about the Voss family's 15-year operation, about Helen Crawford's disappearance, about the trust Evelyn had built to protect the lighthouse. I told him about Ashford's fraudulent evaluation and the $18,000 bribe. I told him about Kenneth's midnight assault and Lily's video. I watched his face change as each piece of information landed, like watching a man walk into deeper and deeper water until it reaches his chest, his neck, his mouth. When I finished, he was crying. Not loudly, not dramatically, just tears running down his face into his coffee cup. His jaw clenched so hard, I could see the muscles jumping beneath his skin. He did not wipe his eyes. He let the tears fall, as if he believed he deserved every one of them. I should have seen it, he whispered. I should have protected you. I should have protected Lily. I am your son, and I let her hit you. And I sat there, and I did nothing. I reached across the table and put my hand on his arm. I did not tell him it was okay, because it was not okay. I did not tell him I forgave him, because forgiveness is not something you hand out like change from your pocket. It is something that builds slowly, like a tide coming in, one wave at a time. What I said was, "You are here now." He wiped his face with the back of his hand and straightened in his chair. Then he pushed the bank statements across the table. "Look at these," he said. I unfolded the statements. They were from an account I had never seen, held at a bank in Wilmington, Delaware, under the name Meridian Coastal Holdings, the same shell company that had paid Ashford. But these statements showed something larger. Over the past 18 months, a total of $250,000 had been transferred from this account to 3 separate destinations. $80,000 to a law firm in Trenton that specialized in title disputes, $70,000 to a lobbying group that worked with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, and $100,000 to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, whose beneficiary was listed only as a numbered entity. They are trying to get the shipwreck designation removed, I said. The words came out flat and cold. Marcus nodded. The letters from Rachel explain it, he said. Rachel is not a person. It is a code name. The Voss family uses it for their operation. The Rachel letters are instructions, step-by-step plans for dismantling property protections, bribing officials, and transferring assets through shell companies. Stephanie kept them as insurance, in case her parents ever tried to cut her out. I stacked the papers neatly and placed them beside the coffee cups. Then I picked up the photograph of the young woman. Before Rachel. Before the operation had a name. Before Stephanie became Nicole, became whoever she needed to be to take what did not belong to her. Marcus looked at me. "What do we do now?" he asked. I stood up and walked to the phone on the hallway table. I dialed Harlow's number. He answered on the first ring, the way he always did, like a man who never stops standing watch. "James," I said. "Call Sarah Mitchell. Tell her the lighthouse has a story to tell. And tell her to bring a camera." Sarah Mitchell arrived at the lighthouse on a Thursday afternoon, driving a rented black sedan with a camera bag on the passenger seat and a look in her eyes that I recognized immediately. It was the look Evelyn used to get when she found a loose thread and knew that if she pulled it, the whole fabric would come apart. Sarah was 41 years old, tall, with short dark hair and a handshake that meant business. She had been an investigative correspondent for the Philadelphia Inquirer for 14 years. She had won 2 national press awards for her work on financial fraud cases, and she had been waiting for this call for over a year. "Evelyn contacted me 16 months ago," Sarah said, sitting at the chart room desk with a recorder running and a notebook open. "She sent me a package. No return address. Inside was a summary of the Voss family's operation, a timeline of their known victims, and a letter asking me to hold the story until the right moment. She said I would know when that moment was because a man named James Harlow would call me and say the lighthouse has a story to tell." I looked at Harlow. He was leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed, and for the first time since this began, I saw something on his face that might have been relief. Evelyn had built a machine with many moving parts, and the last gear had just clicked into place. Sarah spent 3 days at the lighthouse. She reviewed Evelyn's journal, the USB drive, the bank statements Marcus had found, the Rachel letters, and every hour of surveillance footage from Harlow's camera system. She interviewed me on the record for 4 hours. She interviewed Lily for 2. She interviewed Angela Torres, who provided certified copies of the trust documents, the quiet title action, and the camera authorization. She interviewed Harlow, who walked her through the counter-surveillance operation, the listening devices, the Ashford bribe, and the financial trail connecting Meridian Coastal Holdings to the Voss family. On the 3rd evening, Sarah sat me down in the kitchen and said, "Walter, I have enough for a story that will run on the front page and keep running for a week. But I want to do something bigger. I want to do a live broadcast from the lighthouse. With your permission, I want to invite a camera crew and stream the evidence presentation in real time so that the Voss family cannot bury this the way they buried Helen Crawford." I looked at the compass on the shelf. "True north is where your heart is." "Yes," I said. The broadcast was scheduled for the following Saturday evening at 7 o'clock. Sarah's network affiliate agreed to carry it live, and the Inquirer set up a simultaneous web stream. Angela coordinated with the FBI's Elder Abuse Task Force, who had been building their own case against the Voss family, based on the materials Evelyn's lighthouse clause had automatically transmitted when Kenneth violated the restraining order by returning to the property during the storm. The FBI agreed to have agents present at the broadcast, positioned outside the lighthouse and along Beach Avenue, ready to execute arrest warrants the moment the evidence was made public. 327 people gathered on the South Lawn that evening. Many of them had been at the anniversary celebration 2 weeks earlier. They came back because word had spread through Cape May, the way news travels in small coastal towns, carried on the wind from dock to dock, from kitchen to kitchen, from one worried face to the next. "Something is happening at the lighthouse. Something you need to see." Sarah set up a podium on the stage with 2 monitors facing the audience. The camera crew positioned 3 units around the lawn and 1 inside the lantern room, capturing the lighthouse beam as it swept over the crowd. The November air was sharp and still, and the ocean behind us was flat and dark, like a sheet of black glass. She began with Helen Crawford. She showed the photograph of Helen on the porch in Savannah, smiling with her glass of sweet tea. She showed the property records, the bank transfers, the timeline, the Nicole Voss's infiltration. She showed the before and after. A woman with a home, a pension, a life. Then nothing. An empty house, a closed case. A family that got away with it. The crowd was silent. 327 people, and not one of them made a sound. Then Sarah showed the second video. The footage from Lily's phone. Kenneth in the dark kitchen, grabbing my shirt, pushing me into the table, his voice thick with whiskey and threats. "You are going to sign those papers. You are going to sign them tonight, or I am going to make sure you never climb those stairs again." The camera captured everything. The grab, the shove, the teacup shattering on the floor, and Lily's voice, steady as the lighthouse beam. "Get away from my grandfather." A woman in the 3rd row gasped. A man near the back stood up. I could feel the energy in the crowd shift, the way the air changes pressure before a storm. Sarah showed the 3rd video. This one came from Harlow's camera system. It showed Dr. Ashford's office, the beige walls, the rimless glasses, the yellow legal pad. It showed me performing the cognitive test, getting the year wrong, drawing the bunched clock face. And then it showed the wire transfer receipt, $18,000 from Meridian Coastal Holdings to Ashford's personal account. A doctor paid to diagnose a healthy man with dementia. A medical license used as a weapon. The crowd was no longer silent. Voices rose from every row, angry and disbelieving and sharp, with the particular outrage that comes when ordinary people realize that the systems meant to protect them have been turned against someone who looks like their father, their grandfather, their neighbor. Sarah paused. She looked at the audience, then at me, then at the lantern room above, where the light turned slowly against the black sky. And then she said, "There is one more thing. Someone is here tonight who was not on the program. Someone who has traveled a very long way to be with us. Someone the Voss family believes is dead." She turned to the side of the stage. A woman stepped out from behind the white tent. She was in her mid-60s, thin, with gray hair pulled back, and a face that had aged more than it should have in 4 years. She wore a simple blue coat, and she was holding a manila folder against her chest like a shield. The photograph on the monitor behind Sarah changed. It showed the same woman, younger, standing on a porch in Savannah, smiling, holding a glass of sweet tea. 327 people turned to look at Helen Crawford, alive, standing in the November wind on the south lawn of the Brennan Lighthouse, ready to tell the world what the Voss family had done to her. Helen Crawford took the stage the way a woman takes a witness stand. Slowly, deliberately, with the weight of 4 years of silence pressing on her shoulders, like a coat made of iron. She set the manila folder on the podium, opened it, and looked out at 327 faces. The lighthouse beam swept above her head, and her shadow stretched across the lawn like a second version of herself, the one that had been hiding in the dark since 2019. "My name is Helen Crawford," she said. Her voice was thin but steady. "I am 64 years old. I was a 4th-grade teacher in Savannah, Georgia, for 31 years. 4 years ago, the Voss family stole my home, my savings, my pension, and my identity. And when I tried to fight back, they made me disappear." Helen told her story the way a good teacher tells a lesson. Her husband, Colonel James Crawford, died in 2017. She was alone in a 5-bedroom house on 14 acres. Then Nicole Voss appeared, the sweet young woman from the church who brought casseroles and stayed for coffee and listened with eyes full of false compassion. "Nicole was patient," Helen said. "She let me believe she was the daughter I never had. And then, piece by piece, she took everything: the bank account access, the power of attorney, the property transfer to the Delaware Shell Company, the forged documents. Helen signed because Nicole told her to. She signed because she was lonely and tired and trusted the woman sitting next to her on the porch every Tuesday afternoon. When Helen went to the police, Kenneth Voss hired a lawyer who filed 17 motions in 8 weeks, burying the case. Patricia wrote a letter to the Savannah Morning News, calling Helen confused and delusional. Nicole stopped coming. The church friends stopped calling. Within 3 months, Helen had nothing. Then they came for the rest, Helen said. Her voice dropped. One night in November, 2 men came to my house. They told me I had 2 choices: leave Savannah forever, or face a lawsuit that would put me in debt for the rest of my life. They said Kenneth had documentation proving I gave everything away voluntarily. She paused. I believed them, she said. I was 60 years old with nothing left. So I packed 1 suitcase and drove north. I crossed into Canada at a border station in Vermont, using my maiden name. I found a room outside Montreal and lived there for 4 years, working in a bakery, paying rent in cash, not telling anyone who I was. She looked directly at the camera. The Voss family did not kill me, she said, but they erased me. They took my name and my home and my history and sealed me in a box. And I would still be in that box if a woman named Evelyn Brennan had not found me. She held up a letter. Cream-colored paper, blue ink, Evelyn's handwriting. This arrived at the bakery 6 months before Evelyn died, Helen said. She told me what the Voss family was doing to her husband. She asked me to come forward when the time was right. She said she could not promise safety or justice, but she could promise I would not be alone. Helen set the letter down. I am here, she said, because Evelyn Brennan kept her promise. Even after death, 327 people applauded. Some were crying. I was crying. Lily gripped my hand so hard I could feel her pulse against my palm. Harlow stood behind us with his jaw set tight, and I knew behind those steady eyes a sailor was saluting a woman he had loved like a sister. Sarah Mitchell stepped to the microphone. She thanked Helen, thanked the audience, and then looked toward the access road where blue and red lights had appeared silently in the darkness. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah said, "the FBI is now executing arrest warrants for Kenneth Voss, Patricia Voss, and Stephanie Voss Brennan. The charges include wire fraud, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, financial exploitation of vulnerable adults, and obstruction of justice." Agents in dark jackets moved through the crowd with quiet efficiency. Kenneth and Patricia were at their rental house on Beach Avenue, watching the broadcast on television. Patricia opened the door in a bathrobe. Kenneth sat on the couch with Sarah's live stream still playing, his face frozen in the blue light of his own exposure. Stephanie was harder to find. She was not at the rental house or the Philadelphia home. Her phone was off, and her car was gone. For 3 hours she was missing, and the echo of Helen Crawford's disappearance hung over the search like a ghost. Then the Coast Guard spotted her. A small rented motorboat heading south from Cape May Marina, running without lights, cutting through dark water toward open ocean. Harlow heard the radio call on the Resolute's scanner and was moving before the transmission ended. He reached her first, 2 miles offshore. The engine had stalled. The boat drifted in the current. Stephanie sat in the stern with her hands in her lap and her face empty of everything, except the understanding that there was nowhere left to go. The Coast Guard brought her in. The FBI waited at the dock. She was placed in handcuffs under the lighthouse beam, and as the agents led her to the vehicle, she looked up at the tower one last time. The light swept across her face, and for a single second I saw her clearly. Not the smiling woman who kissed my cheek and called me Walter. Not the careful predator who planted listening devices in my home. Just a woman standing at the end of a road she had chosen a long time ago, watching the light she had tried to steal turn above her like a judgment she could not appeal. The federal trial began on a Monday in December, in a courtroom in Camden that smelled like old wood and floor polish, and the particular kind of tension that fills a room where lives are about to be weighed and measured. I sat in the front row behind the prosecution table, wearing the blue suit from the anniversary ceremony, with Lily on my left and Marcus on my right. It was the first time the three of us had sat together since the dinner. Marcus had not touched me or spoken much on the drive up, but he was there. He had chosen to be there. And for now, that was enough. The prosecution was led by Assistant United States Attorney Daniel Reeves, a man in his early 40s with a quiet voice and a habit of pausing before his most important sentences, the way a conductor lifts the baton before the first note. He had spent 3 weeks preparing the case with Angela Torres and the FBI task force, and he presented it with the precision of someone laying bricks. Each piece of evidence was placed exactly where it needed to be. Each witness called in the order that built the wall highest. Helen Crawford testified first. She sat in the witness chair for 2.5 hours and told her story again. The same story she had told on the lighthouse lawn, but this time under oath, with a court reporter recording every syllable and a jury of 12 people listening with the focused attention of citizens who understood that what they were hearing could happen to their own parents. The defense attorney tried to challenge her credibility. He suggested she had given her assets to Nicole voluntarily. He implied that her years in Canada were evidence of instability, not fear. Helen answered every question with the calm, measured patience of a woman who had taught 4th graders for 31 years and could not be rattled by a man in an expensive suit. Sarah Mitchell testified next, presenting the financial records, the shell company network, and the Rachel letters Marcus had found in Stephanie's desk. She connected every transaction to a name, every name to an account, every account to a loss. The jury followed her testimony the way you follow a map through unfamiliar territory, each turn revealing another layer of the fraud. Harlow testified about the surveillance operation, the listening devices, the Ashford bribe, and the midnight assault. He spoke in short, precise sentences, the way a naval officer delivers a report. When the defense asked why he had installed cameras without informing the family, he held up Angela's signed authorization and said, I informed the property owner. The trustee authorized the installation in writing. Everything was legal. Everything was documented. The judge sustained every objection the defense raised and overruled every attempt to suppress the footage. Then the prosecution played the videos. Kenneth in the dark kitchen, grabbing my shirt, pushing me into the table. Stephanie's phone call to Ashford discussing the fabricated diagnosis. Ashford's office recording, showing the rigged evaluation. And Lily's 47 minutes of footage from the top of the stairs, her steady voice cutting through the darkness like the lighthouse beam itself. Get away from my grandfather. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They returned on a Wednesday afternoon. The four-person stood and read the verdicts in a voice that carried no emotion, but carried all the weight in the world. Kenneth Voss, guilty of wire fraud, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, and financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. Patricia Voss, guilty of conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Stephanie Voss Brennan, guilty of wire fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy, and obstruction. The courtroom exhaled. Lily squeezed my hand. Marcus put his face in his hands and wept. Quietly, the way a man weeps when he finally understands what his silence cost. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Kenneth received 12 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay full restitution of all stolen assets, including Helen Crawford's property and savings. Patricia received 8 years. Stephanie received 5 years, with an additional 500 hours of community service to be completed at a facility called Sunrise Gardens, an elder care center in southern New Jersey. The judge said she wanted Stephanie to spend 500 hours looking into the faces of people like the ones she had tried to destroy. Dr. Ashford's medical license was revoked permanently. His $18,000 bribe was entered into evidence as Exhibit 47, and he was charged separately with conspiracy and healthcare fraud. After the sentencing, Angela asked me to stay. She had one more piece of business. We went to a small conference room behind the courtroom. Just me, Angela, Lily, and Marcus. Angela set a glass bottle on the table. The message in a bottle from Evelyn's naval chest. The one she had told me not to open until the trial. I broke the wax seal. My hands were steadier than they had been the night I found it. I unrolled the paper inside and read Evelyn's final words aloud. My dearest Walter, if you are reading this, then justice has been done, and our home is safe. I have one last gift for you. Inside the trust, there is a clause I never told Angela about. It is on page 58, paragraph 12, written in language so technical that only a maritime attorney would recognize it. It states that upon the conviction of any party found guilty of attempting to defraud the trust, all beneficial interest transfers immediately and irrevocably to the named heir. This means that as of today, Lily does not inherit the lighthouse when you die. She inherits it now. Angela opened the trust document to page 58. She read paragraph 12. She looked up at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Surprise. Evelyn had hidden a clause inside the trust that even her own trustee did not know about. A clause written in admiralty law terminology, buried in a section about maritime easements that no one would ever read unless they knew exactly where to look. Lily owns the lighthouse, Angela said. Effective immediately. Lily sat across from me with her hands flat on the table and her grandmother's pearl earrings catching the fluorescent light. She was 16 years old. She owned a 150-year-old lighthouse, 35 parcels of beachfront land, and a secret buried beneath the southern shore that could change her life forever. And she looked at me with those dark eyes, Evelyn's eyes, and said the only thing that mattered. I will keep the light on, Grandpa. I promise. Spring came to Cape May the way it always does. Slowly at first. Then, all at once. Like the tide turning after a long night. The dogwoods bloomed along the access road, and the marsh grass turned from brown to green in a single week, and the ocean shifted from winter gray to the deep, restless blue. That means the cold is finally losing its grip. I stood on the observation deck of the lighthouse and watched the season change the way I had watched it change for 40 years. But this time, I was not watching alone. The museum opened on the first Saturday in April. Lily had chosen the date herself. It was Evelyn's birthday. She had spent the winter working with Angela and the Cape May Historical Society to transform the ground floor of the lighthouse into a public space. The old storage rooms where Evelyn had hidden her naval chest and her thinking room were now exhibition halls with polished floors and track lighting and glass cases displaying artifacts from 150 years of Brennan family history. The original oil lamp from 1874. My great-grandfather's logbook, with entries written in ink that had faded to the color of weak tea. Photographs of every keeper who had ever climbed the 199 steps to light the beacon. And in the center of the main hall, inside a case made of reclaimed lighthouse glass, Evelyn's journal. Open to the first page. Today, I confirmed that my son's wife is trying to steal our home. God forgive me for what I am about to do. Beside the journal was the brass compass. True north is where your heart is. Visitors could read the engraving, but they could not touch it. Some things are too important to be handled by strangers. The museum was called the Evelyn Brennan Center for Elder Abuse Awareness and Support. Angela had helped Lily establish it as a non-profit, funded initially by a portion of the restitution payments ordered by the court. Helen Crawford served on the advisory board. Sarah Mitchell had written a feature story about the center for the Enquirer that ran the week before the opening, and by Saturday morning, the phone had not stopped ringing with calls from families across the country who had experienced similar fraud and had nowhere to turn. 308 people came to the opening. Not quite as many as the anniversary celebration. But these were different. They were not spectators. They were survivors. Elderly men and women who had been cheated by family members, by caregivers, by lawyers and doctors they trusted. They came from New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Delaware, and as far as Georgia, where Helen Crawford had personally invited 11 families she had connected with during her own recovery. They stood in the exhibition halls and read the displays, and looked at each other with the recognition that comes when you realize your pain is not unique, that there are others who understand, and that understanding is the first step towards something that might, in time, feel like healing. Lily gave the opening speech. She stood on the same stage where Sarah Mitchell had announced the FBI arrests, wearing a navy blue dress and her grandmother's pearl earrings, and she spoke without notes. She was 17 now. Her birthday had passed in February, and Marcus had come to the lighthouse to celebrate it. He brought a cake he had baked himself, badly, with lopsided frosting and candles that would not stay straight. Lily had laughed and eaten 2 pieces, and called it the best cake she had ever had. It was not forgiveness, but it was a beginning. Lily told the crowd about Evelyn. Not the legal strategist. Not the woman who built an irrevocable trust and hid clauses in admiralty law and sent letters to witnesses in Canadian bakeries. She told them about the woman who pinned recipe cards above the stove and picked blackberries along the cliff and sat in the lantern room on clear nights, reading novels by the sweep of the beam. She told them about a grandmother who taught her to dive off the dock, to identify constellations, to listen to the ocean when she felt lost. And she told them that the lighthouse was not a building. It was a promise that someone would always be watching, that the light would always be on, and that no one who came to this shore would ever be left alone in the dark. Marcus stood beside me during the speech. He did not cry this time. He listened with his hands at his sides and his chin raised. And when Lily finished, he was the first to applaud. I looked at my son and saw something I had not seen in years. His own face, not Stephanie's version of it. Not the mask of compliance she had shaped over 3 years of manipulation. Just Marcus, tired, scarred, but present, and trying. After the ceremony, I walked up the 199 steps alone. I did this every evening now. My hip ached on step 87, the way it always did, and by step 150 my breathing was heavy. But I climbed. Because Evelyn climbed these stairs with a body full of cancer and never once complained. And if she could do that, I could do this. I reached the lantern room and stood at the glass. The sun was setting over the Atlantic, turning the water to copper and gold. The southern shoreline curved away below me, and somewhere beneath that sand lay the secret Evelyn had buried. The rare earth minerals that could be worth $20 to $30 million. Lily knew about them. Angela knew. Harlow knew. But for now, they stayed in the ground, protected by the shipwreck designation and the National Register listing and the quiet, patient foresight of a woman who understood that some treasures are safer when they remain hidden. I placed my hand on the glass. It was warm from the last of the sunlight. "Evelyn," I said. "The light is on." Then I turned the beam on, the way I did every night, and watched it sweep out across the dark water, reaching for the horizon, steady and unbroken, the way it had been for 150 years, and the way it would be for 150 more, because a Brennan had promised. And Brennans keep their promises. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of someone you love, someone you are afraid for, or someone you wish you had protected, then do something tonight. Call them. Visit them. Ask them how they are. Do not wait for a signal in the dark. Be the light yourself. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about ordinary people who refuse to be broken, subscribe to this channel and leave a comment telling me about the person you are thinking of right now. I will read every single one. Because no one should ever be alone in the dark.